Now I can't speak for you, but I myself do love finding a new game. And by a new game I don't just mean one that's hot off the press or one even that's been sitting in our very own backlogs for a decade or two, but a game that we would never have looked at twice before, picking it up, giving it a play and just seeing what we missed out on. And for me this week, well, I done that very thing. And if you want to see how I got on with Paper Mario, The 1000 Year Door, you just wait until after these. Now, as much as in the same way as food, when it comes to video games, the first bite is also with the eyes. And as I'm fairly positive that most of you will agree, Paper Mario The 1000 Year Door has an art style that will age like a very fine wine indeed. Despite being a game from 2004, the developers chose very wisely indeed when it came to not choosing polygonal 3D graphics, which were the preferred art style of the era. So without a shadow of a doubt, we should most definitely give that decision a standing ovation, because what it left us with was a game with visual appeal that wouldn't need nostalgia tinted glasses for anyone to fully appreciate it. I mean, just look at it people, those beautifully hand-drawn 2D images just absolutely pop from the screen, and yes, it's nearly 20 years old, and yes, I did say 2D, but there is a 3D aspect, but we'll get there eventually. So I can say without any reservations that for me this game most definitely gets a 10 out of 10 when it comes to visual appeal. Next up, let's easily segue into the music, because once the eyes have had their feast, it's time for the ears. And I can gladly say that Nintendo did not skimp in the slightest when it came to their musical offerings in this game, because not only did you get the classic sound of Mario that you were craving for anyway, but it also carried with it a modern appeal, and thematically for each of the different levels you encounter, the music is absolutely composed to the standards that you would expect from Nintendo. It might not be super flashy by today's standards, but it's exactly what this game needed. The jewel in the crown of Paper Mario and The 1000 Year Door, however, is absolutely the gameplay. And yes, I know that on the surface this plays very much like a very kiddie friendly JRPG, but when you start to put some real time into the game, you can quite easily see the level of complexity that is embedded into this game. It does have all the common tropes of a traditional turn-based combat JRPG, but for me where the gameplay truly shines is with the utilisation of your party members. Now of course party members are no new thing to JRPGs, but with Paper Mario The 1000 Year Door you can only take one of your party members into battle at any one time, and let me tell you that the individual traits of each of your party members is so important when it comes to the tactics that you employ within each and every battle. Now the game is obviously designed for a younger player, so experienced RPG fans won't have a great deal of difficulty coming to grips with the combat, but the journey of the gameplay, which really forces you into getting to know each and every one of your party members quite intimately, so that you know which one to take into a battle first and just when to switch out, will give even the most experienced gamers enough of a thrill to instill a real love of this game into their very soul. And couple that with the fact that when you execute a move with either Mario or one of your party members, this stage of the battle is not passive either, as a list of the many special moves that you will develop during the course of the game require quite different input commands to execute each move perfectly, which adds another layer of complexity which will delight both new and experienced players in equal measures. Putting the role-playing aspects of the game aside for just one moment, we have to remember this is a Mario game, so there will be some platforming to contend with, and it's at this stage that you truly appreciate the 2D 3D merge of this particular game, because although for the most part you are playing with a 2D perspective, you are playing within a 3D world, and this makes the platforming very complicated indeed. Now anyone who's played Mario games in the past will say that difficult platforming is par for the course, but rather than just the pixel perfect jumps that you may have had to make back in the day, it's this whole merger of the 2D and 3D world that make Paper Mario 1000 Year Door extremely difficult at points when it comes to the platforming. It's not so difficult that you'll want to give up after a short amount of time failing to jump the same jump time and time again, but it does require you to put a reasonable amount of thought into each jump before you approach it. And on top of that, it's not just a simple platforming section that you'll be faced with, but a puzzle platforming section, and it's also absolutely littered with a host of secrets that you will have to discover. A great deal of those secrets require you to know your party inside out and what they can do and where they can do it. Now, I don't want to spoil too much of the game, because if you have played this game you will know exactly why I've fallen in love with it. And if you haven't played this before, then I want you to go out there and experience this for yourself, because even myself, not being a Nintendo fan, I didn't grow up with Nintendo, and I don't know a great deal about the games that Nintendo put out there, which is, yes, much to my shame, but even with my very limited knowledge I could see just how much love Nintendo had poured into this particular venture. There's an absolute wealth of Nintendo lore pumped into this particular game, and as I've said, I'm not a Nintendo fan, but even I could see where they were having a little nod and a wink towards games such as The Legend of Zelda, Pikmin, and even Metroid. There are so many things to do and discover in this game, it makes it an absolute must play. And even if you're not an RPG fan, and you probably will be if you're watching this particular video, but if you've stumbled upon this and you're not an RPG fan, well, this without a doubt is the game that I would now recommend to any non-RPG fan to try and maybe even get into RPGs, and I think you might just be pleasantly surprised. And for me, this is an absolute 10 out of 10 game, and that's something that I don't get to say all the time. So there you go, my friends, that's Paper Mario and the 1000-Year Door, and I absolutely loved this game, there's no doubt about it. Everything about it, the art style, the music, the gameplay, it had everything in it that I look for in a JRPG, and even a little bit more. Now, of course, this part of the video is always about you, because I want you to drop down into the comments and let me know if you've played this before, or is it sitting in your backlog ready to be played and you haven't quite got there yet, or is it a game that you've got absolutely no interest in? And if it is the latter, then I hope maybe that I've nudged you along to giving this one a go, because it's absolutely fantastic, and that's no lie. I'm a Sony pony, not a Nintendo fanboy, and to be singing the praises of a Nintendo game that's 20 years old, then it's got to mean something surely. So yes, drop down into the comments, let me know, and until next time, cheerio!